first realize you wanted to perform?
Well, my mother had been an actress she'd stopped before I was born, but she majored in drama in college, and she went to Yale Drama School, which she didn't like actually, and she left. But she studied with Uta Hagen in New York and Stella Adler, and she acted for a number of years. And so I was taken to the theater from a very, like 3, very little age, Shakespeare in the Park and a lot of Broadway and that kind of thing. So I don't know. I mean, I think my mother she didn't really mean to turn me into an actor, but I think she really did. She kind of couldn't help herself, I think. She was so interested in it, she wanted to share it with me. So I don't know. I mean, I think when did I start saying I wanted to be an actor? Probably 9, 10, around there.
Did anyone else, was it just your mother's influence, or was there anyone else?
No, it was pretty much my mother.
Yeah. What was your first job?
It sort of depends on what you count.
Okay, all right. What was your first job ever? Let's try that one.
My first job, I did a tiny little bit of modeling when I was probably 9, like one day of modeling at Bloomingdale's. And, but really probably my first real job that sort of started me was when I was about 11, and I did an industrial film.
Oh, so how you got your SAG
Cancer
card?
Society.
Oh.
No, it was not SAG. My first SAG job was an after-school special when I was 12, called The 7 Wishes of a Rich Kid, with Robbie Rist. Do people know who Robbie Rist is? He's that little blonde boy that looks like John Denver with the glasses.
Oh, yes.
And Butterfly McQueen.
Yes. Wow.
Who I did not meet because I was not in any scenes with her.
Wow. Now, you're an only child, correct?
I am.
Are you nervous about having two kids now and not having anything to sort of bounce off of on that?
I'm really ignorant of the sibling thing. I think
could work in your favor.
I think my boyfriend is very worried. He has a brother. He knows. He is very worried.
And your daughter's 6, so
she's 6.
She's a little older, and she must be really excited.
She's very excited. We'll see when he comes how she feels, but right now she's very excited.
Oh, she'll be great. She'll be great. So, how did you get an agent? How did you get your first agent?
How did I get my first agent? Well, so my mother went to Yale Drama, and she still had some friends from that time who were in the business, including this man who has since died named Ed Levy. And he was trying to make a film of a Norma Klein novel called Mom, the Wolfman and Me, which was a very popular teenage novel at the time. And the girl in it was like 11, and I was like 11. So we ran into him one time, and he thought I would maybe be good. And so he brought me over, and I read a little bit, and he thought I was good. And his son was an actor, a working actor about my age, like a year older. And he sent me off to meet Jeremy's manager, and she liked me. And so I sort of signed up. And my ambitions were very modest because I didn't want to think, I didn't want to wish for too much. And
God forbid.
Right.
Right.
So I thought I would just do commercials. And I thought I would put away the money and pay for college. I wasn't ever thinking that I would become a real actor, And I did some commercials. I did a Donkey Kong commercial. I did a Jell-O commercial. I did a Kodak commercial. I did some voiceovers and things. And I was okay at them, but I was not really very good at them.
Now, why do you say that?
They thought I had a nice Midwestern look. So they thought that would really be good. But I didn't have quite the winning smile. And finally, when I was about 15 or 16, a casting agent I was going on tape for a commercial, and she actually took me and showed me my tape. She was like, "Come over here, look at this." And I watched it, and she said, "You see how embarrassed you look?
Wow.
That's not why you're not getting more of these." And I did that some, but I think there was something about that.
You were more comfortable.
Yeah, so I actually could have sort of found my way to the legitimate theater, because they were more, the commercials were looking for a kid that just were sort of sunny and didn't look like they were thinking anything. Which I would have done if I could. That was my intention, but I couldn't. So I sort of found my way to these theater jobs and these more like after school specials where there's something more to play and where the director could talk to you and modify your performance, and I was much better at that than at the sort of the selling thing.
And that a little more organic for you and made more sense.
Yeah.
How is it as a kid working with directors? Did you have an experience where, what I find, and I do a lot of commercials, but what I find is that when I work with kids, a director is talking to the 6-year-old like he's 56. And even at that, he's not doing a really good job.
I mean, I think how kids are as actors and how directors are with kids. I mean, I think it just points to the extremes of it. I mean, you see those child actors who are the greatest actors in the world. Do you know?
Right.
And they're just somehow so intuitive about it, and they know everything, and you can endlessly modulate them, and they just somehow know. And then you have the kids, no matter how many times you direct them, they will never get it.
Right.
They will. It's like night and day. You can just tell. And I think it's a real test of a director, because I had mostly really good directors, because as I say, if they were just looking for the cute kid who would just hit her marks and whatever, they probably weren't going to cast me anyway.
Gotcha.
I had a lot of really good directors, but I also think I have worked with directors who I might have thought were fine, but then I saw them working with a kid, and I saw that they're really not at all. Do you know? Yeah. I mean, how in the same way a kid works much more, a really good kid actor works much more organically. That director, you just sort of see his or her flaws kind of revealed if they're just trying to jump to the chase and trying to get a result from that child.
Right.
It's so much more apparent than if they're trying to get a result from, they can disguise it in more, high-blown language if they're talking to an adult.
Right. Right. You're kind of naked if you're talking to a 6-year-old. There's only so much you can hide.
Right. And they say things like, now when you say this line, I want you to cry like that. You know what I mean? I mean, you would very few directors are so stupid that they would say that to an adult actor. But
although I'm sure. How did you find the transition from child actor to adult actor? Was that an easy transition?
I was very worried about that. I since I started working so young, I had a lot of time to see 18 or 21 or whatever coming. I was very worried about it. I didn't particularly think I was going to be able to make that transition because so many people don't.
Did you want to do that? Did you want to?
Again, it was the kind of thing where I sort of didn't let myself hope about it too much. Do you know?
Yeah.
Like I put my money in the bank I went to college and but I think I had an advantage in that I was sort of approaching roles in a sort of a semi-adult way anyway. Not to say I don't feel like I have a lot of bad habits from starting so young and from also not ever being trained. I feel like I have a lot of bad habits that I've tried to, throw by the wayside. But I feel it was pretty easy, although they didn't know what to do with me for a while, particularly because for so long I looked so young and I had long blonde hair and all that stuff, that it was sort of kind of around the time that I worked all through my 20s, and but I would say in a way kind of finding Miranda really helped because she was so different than most of what I'd played as a kid, because most of what I played as a kid were these sort of spacey, timid, gentle, wide-eyed, sweet people, victims sometimes, and then they, cut all my hair off and dyed it, and I looked different, and I had a really different character to play, so that sometimes when people see me now that only know me from Sex and the City, when they see some role that I'm playing as a child, right, they're very surprised because they see it's my same face, but it's a very different package,
Interesting. Was that your character choice to cut your hair and color it and do all those physical changes?
I did the pilot of Sex and the City when I was 30, I think. 30, 31, something like that. And when I was 28, I was nominated for a Tony, and I went to this hairdresser, and he said, "Oh, we should do something great, and we should dye it red," and, So I had sort of done that a little bit already,
right.
you know. Mm-hmm. And I think they'd seen some footage of me in a TV role I did like that, and they liked that. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And they also thought, that'll help, not 3 blondes, So.
Now, when you were 18, you were doing 2 Broadway shows at the same time?
Yes.
That just sounds so kind of amazing and terrifying. And, well, you're 18, so you have the energy. That's, one thing about 18.
Right.
How was that? I mean, how was that to live through that?
Well, it sounds kind of, I would say the incredible things about them were the plays themselves. I mean, it sounds kind of amazing to hear from the outside that I did them both at the same time, but that really wasn't much of anything. It was really the 2 plays because Mike Nichols directed both of them. One was by Tom Stoppard, one was by David Rabe, tremendous, writers. And they both had these, stellar movie star, great actor cast. One of the Hurly-Burly had William Hurt, Sigourney Weaver, Harvey Keitel, Jerry Stiller, Judith Ivey, Christopher Walken, and me in it. Wow. And the other one had Jeremy Irons, Glenn Close, Christine Baranski, and Peter Gallagher. Wow. In it. So, I mean, the amount of talent, and they were both huge hits, and they were great plays and totally different from each other. Mm-hmm. So I did each of them separately for quite a while.
Okay.
We rehearsed The Real Thing. We took it out of town to Boston. We opened there. We brought it into Broadway. We opened. We were hit. Then I left. I went and did Hurly-Burly in Chicago, then off Broadway, then So I had quite a long run with each of them separately, and they were both amazing, enormous experiences in my life. And then, I did them both for like 3 months, and it was kind of a great gimmick,
Fabulous.
And it was.
First act in one, the second act in the other.
First act in one, second act in the other.
Back to the third
act in the first one again.
I mean, I read this and I just kept reading it over and over again. It's really quite a feat. It's an amazing feat.
Right. But anyone who's done a run of a play for more than a few months knows that one of the most exhausting things when you're in a longer run is to have all that downtime off stage. And so in Hurly-Burly, I would come on in like the first hour, and then I wouldn't come on again till like after 11 o'clock at night.
Oh, yeah,
so
that's killer.
It's like 2 hours off. I mean, what are you going to do? Do another play. It's much less tiring to go do another part, and just sit there and like try and do your homework.
So you would do this again if the opportunity.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And it's not that. I mean, it's no different really than doing, two different roles in the same play, which actors do all the time.
Right. So you said you didn't study with anyone. Have you ever studied with anyone?
Not really. When I was 27, I did Angels in America for like 8 months. And I thought part of the reason I never studied with anyone was the first 10 years of my career, I was just trying to keep my head above water in regular school. And then I was always scared to go into an acting class, particularly a kind of a sought-after acting class, because I thought, well, I'll just get a job and I'll be gone and they'll be mad at me.
Right.
So when I signed on for Angels in America, I thought, well, I know I'll be here. I should finally do this thing that I've been wanting to do for so long. So I only did it for like a semester or something, but I went to HB Studios and I took an Alexander class and I took a scene study class with Uta Hagen, which I found very kind of amazing and very intimidating. I just felt like I've been faking this thing all these years, and there's actually a way to do it, and it may be too late for me.
But you seem to be doing okay, so don't worry too much about it. What advice would you give to fellow actors who are still struggling in terms of maybe how to fashion a career? training versus no training? What's off the top of your head? What would you tell someone who came up to you?
Well, it's so, people are so different and actors are so different from one another. I mean, as I say, I feel like obviously I got trained on the job. Everybody's got to get trained somewhere. You can't, unless you're one of those kids, you can't just walk into it. So I would say training always seems to me like a good thing, and there's so many different ways you can go with it. If you can figure out where you really want to, if you want to go the Shakespeare route, or you want to go the really avant-garde, Suzuki mime route, or if you want to go kind of more your basic scene study. I think just, if you, just to be an actor, you got to be acting wherever that is. If it's in a class, or if it's, getting your friends together and doing readings and falling in love with a play and trying to put it on, or trying to make your own film. I just think, it's important to be doing it and to carve out time in your life to be doing it if you're not being paid for it and you're trying to make a living another way, but to try and protect time so that you feel like you're not getting away from it, that you're saying you're an actor, but that you're not, every day doing something that makes you feel like an actor.
Right. Did you ever have a survival job?
No.
Very lucky. Wow, you have been working a lot.
Yeah.
I just saw something here and I lost it. Yeah. What was the turning point in your career? What do you think was a pivotal sort of moment?
Yeah, I wouldn't say there was. I would say there were a lot of them. In a way, you could say Sex and the City is in a certain way, but I feel like, when I was 12, I did this movie, Little Darlings. To me, that was as big a break as I've gotten before or since, It was this tremendous movie with Tatum O'Neal and Christy McNichol, and I had a really great part, and we went to Georgia for 10 weeks, and I still look at that film. I love that film.
It's a great film.
And it was so amazing to me to be like 12 and to just be so new to this world and be auditioning and just think, and now I'm going to go and be in this movie with those actresses that I've watched since they were little and I was little, and it was a Paramount movie, and still I feel like Paramount is my studio, which is, it's not. But I feel, it just felt like such an entree into that world. Like I'm working for a movie like Paramount,
Right. Now, how old were you when you did Amadeus? Oh, you were in 11th grade?
Turned 17.
I read a quote from you. I don't think I wrote it down, but I thought it was really interesting. The producers flew, you were in 11th grade, producers flew you back and forth from Prague 5 times?
Five or six
times.
I would say.
And the quote I read, you were talking about it, it was a little bit later, you were talking about it in retrospect, saying, damn, I know I'm going to butcher it, but something to the effect of, you learn in this business when people want you, they'll do whatever they need to do to get you.
Yeah.
Did you know that at the time, or was that something you realized in retrospect?
Well, it was a kind of a lesson that I learned a number of times when I was a child, when I was a teenager, and I think it stood me in good stead. I think in a way it was hard to be an actor while I was in school, but when I did Little Darlings when I was 12, I was just so starry-eyed and excited. I just did whatever they wanted, So, and there wasn't really a choice if I wanted to do the movie. So I went for 10 weeks in 7th grade. It was my first year of junior high school. I got through and my grades were okay, but it was, my mother and I looked at each other after that and we said, well, we can't ever do that again.
Right.
Forget it.
Right.
They're not going to let me, I was in a very competitive public high school, and they would not have put up with it. They would have, asked me to leave or whatever. And it was just hard to try and keep up. So we made this agreement that I wouldn't take a job for the rest of, if it was more than 2 weeks during the school year. So, when and there were a number of times, I would hit these things, and I would make these crazy requests. Like I did this play when I was 15 that Louis Malle directed, that John Guare wrote, called Lighty Breeze, and I said I could only do it if they would rehearse me after school. And
good for you.
But it sounds crazy, but
It's what you needed.
and And also, you're not asking for like, I can't do this job unless I have a trailer as big as blah, blah, blah.
Right.
A lot of people are like, oh, a kid who cares about school, that's great, So I did learn that, because also I wasn't playing a game. I wasn't saying these things to make them give them to me. I was saying, I want to really do your job, but because I knew, Amadeus, I really wanted to be in it. Mm-hmm. But it was a 5-month shooting schedule, and I was a low priority. It was a nice part, but it was a small part. They had all kinds of things to worry about. They're not going to be worrying about getting me back to school. Mm-hmm. Right. So we got them to agree that if I didn't work more than 2 days in a row, they would fly me home. And, it's fine for them, too. They don't have to pay per diem and hotel and all that,
Right.
The movie people get so nervous and they want you there when they want you. They just makes you nervous if you're in another continent. But, people make all those sorts of agreements all the time. If you want an actor and that actor has another job, they work it out. So I just had to keep asserting that I had a job and it was school. And they had to, if they really wanted me, they had to take that into consideration.
Now, you're born and raised in New York, correct?
Yes.
Public school in New York?
Yes.
I heard that you were recently arrested.
I was.
Kind of on your crusade to better public schools.
Yes, I was arrested in June.
So you were showing great press.
Yes, it was good. It was good. Actually, Kathy Chalfant was arrested. I recruited her.
Oh, really?
She was arrested too. Danny Jenkins was arrested. Eric Bogosian was going to be arrested. As was Audra McDonald, but they had conflicts and it worked. Jules Pfeiffer was arrested.
Ah.
So, it was good. It was good. It surely got a lot of press. Yeah, we were fighting the city budget cuts, and we're now working on a state level. I'm going to on Wednesday we're going to have a press conference, and we're going to launch a in the few weeks before the election, we're going to try and hit the governor and the gubernatorial candidates pretty hard. And we have a yellow school bus called the 12th Grade Express, and we're going all over the state. And we're going to just try and show people that education is everyone's number one priority wherever they live. If they live in New York City or Rochester or Binghamton.
Good for you. That's terrific.
And Russell Simmons is coming with me, and he's going to try and get some of his artists to come. So
that's great.
Yeah.
Good. And is your daughter in school now?
She is. She's 6. She's in first grade.
Good.
Yes.
What's the difference between American actors and British actors, in your opinion?
British actors like to give other actors notes. I would say that is one main difference, and I think it kind of speaks to the heart of it in a way. I think partly British actors give each other, 2 reasons. One is that they have much more of an aesthetic that we're going to decide together what this scene is going to be. Not you're going to play this note and I'm going to play that note and we're going to see what happens. It's like, if you do this, then I could do this great thing over here. You know what I mean? They plot it all out. And and sometimes it's really great and they seem like they're breathing together and working together, and sometimes it seems really choreographed and contrived. Yeah. I also think that the Brits have much more of a class system inherent in their actors in terms of the younger actors are really the bottom of the pecking order in a way we don't really have so much here. So I think the older you get and the more established that you get, there's much more of a sense, which I really just think comes from, Shakespeare and older actors teaching younger actors, kind of passing it on. So there is this sense, when you see a younger actor, you're kind of helping them if you give them a note.
Gotcha.
So I would say, And I mean, I kind of think that that's sort of, I mean, it's very small and slightly sarcastic, but I think it really sums it up in terms of one is more planned and one is more kind of instinctual, and let's see what you're doing over there. I'm doing this. What are you doing? Let's see what happens. Kind of thing. And they both can work out great, and they both can work out disastrously.
Right.
Yeah.
Which do you prefer, film, theater, or TV? I mean, if you were king of the world, what would you just do forever?
Right. Well, I guess I do like theater an awful lot. I don't really. There are very few plays that I've been in that I really enjoyed the really long runs in. Angels in America was one, though. I did that for 8 months, and I could have kept going. I found so much in that play to play. But I have to admit, I like to see my work. And so when you're in a play, you don't have that opportunity. I guess my favorite thing about acting, even more than interacting with an audience and even more than interacting with the other actors, is the interacting with the director. So that seems probably more like a film thing. But you have the converse, the problem in films is that a theater director, if they're any good at all or whatever, they have loads of time to give you and work with you. Whereas a film director, you've got to be a very confident and determined and brilliant film director to actually feel that you have the time to direct actors rather than be worrying about setting up the shot and the lighting and
Right.
And I would say that Milos Forman is one of my favorite directors in any medium that I ever worked in, because he directed me so much in Amadeus. He not only directed me, elaborately when we were filming, but he auditioned me many, many times. And each time he had me in there for like 45 minutes, and he would work with me. They weren't very long scenes, but I've never had another director that I felt was as concerned with every little detail and nuance and moment of my performance, the way, that he was so interested in, he was as interested in it as I was, and would just keep working.
It's a nice, secure feeling.
Yeah.
That's fabulous.
Very nice. I mean, I think partly he did that because I was a kid. Do you know what I mean? I don't know that he would have, but it was great.
Right. So you're okay with seeing yourself and watching yourself?
Yes, I like
Are you your worst critic, or?
No.
You're pretty okay?
I'm pretty okay. When I did Little Darlings when I was 12, we were in Madison, Georgia, which is a very small place, and there was nothing to do. And we were in a Holiday Inn, like in the middle of nowhere. And we had a very confident director, I guess, named Ron Maxwell. And he would, in the whole cast and the whole crew every night, would gather in like a screening room that they had at the Holiday Inn, and we would all watch all the dailies for an hour or two. And it was so enjoyable. And it connected you so much to what you were doing. Maybe you'd had a hard day and you hadn't felt good, but you go see it and see, oh, it's a movie and it's pretty and, it's funny. So that got me used to it. So whenever I have encountered directors who don't want me to watch rushes, I'm just appalled. Because I think, particularly so many actors are so superstitious and self-conscious, and, a lot of actors know if they're not supposed to be watching them, know what it will do to them, So if you have an actor who says, show me the stuff, I just don't, it's confusing to me that you wouldn't want to take advantage of that.
Yeah. So I think some directors don't trust that.
I guess. I mean, because I watch all the dailies on Sex and the City. I watch and there's a lot. And only what I'm in, I don't,
You mentioned earlier about actors providing their own opportunities for work, which you've done with your theater group. Tell me a little bit about your theater group.
When I was 26, I got an offer to do a play called The Country Club in Vermont. With a good bit of money. I can't remember how much it was a week, but it was some sort of surprising amount of money a week. And I really loved the play, and I really loved the part, and I went and did it. And I met the guy who wrote it, called Douglas Carter Bean, and I just thought he was great. And we loved our play. We thought our production was so great. And we did a number of readings of it at a number of theater companies in New York the year or two afterwards. And we couldn't really get anyone to say, like, yeah, I'll produce that. Mm-hmm. So he decided we should start a theater company. And people every so often come up to you and say, let's start a theater company. And so I just said, sure, Mm-hmm. But he really meant it. And he, found all these contacts, and we sat together and thought who we'd like to have in our theater company, whose work we admired, who we knew, who we didn't know but wanted to know. And so for about a year, we just gathered in his apartment, and we did readings mostly of kind of old American plays, not classic plays, more kind of out-of-the-way plays. And sort of tried to give ourselves an overview of kind of what 20th century American theater was like. And then he was good at getting corporate money from all different movie companies and whatever. And then finally, and we had articles written about us, and we hadn't done anything. And finally, it was getting embarrassing, and we thought we really have to
need to do something.
Produce something. So we decided we would do this play, very lovely, small, one-act play that I actually did a reading of last night, called A Village Wooing by George Bernard Shaw. Peter Frechette and I were going to do the production of it. And I got pregnant. And it's really a play you can't do pregnant. It's about these two people falling in love and whatever. So I was in LA, being secretly pregnant, trying to get a pilot before anyone realized that I was pregnant. And I called Doug and I said, we can't do, because we had a number of plays that we were thinking about doing, that we had done readings of, and we thought, yeah, this is great. So one of them was called Kingdom of Earth, which is a crazy old Tennessee Williams flop. And the character that I would play in that was an overweight, over-the-hill showgirl. So I called Doug and I said, we can't do Village Wooing. I'm pregnant. I'm going to be big as a house. We need to do Kingdom of Earth so I could wear a fat suit. And we did. And John Cameron Mitchell, who did Hedwig, he directed it, and he directed it very inventively and strangely. We had Tennessee Williams on stage. And
wow.
He had some leather boys who would move furniture around. And it was a huge, crazy hit. Whatever. So, yeah, I mean, we've gone through, hard times and a lot of money trouble and all that kind of thing. But we sort of seem to keep coming out okay, and we gather and do our readings publicly or privately. And, we've got a play on now that I think is a wonderful play called The Dark Kalamazoo, which is a one-woman show. I think it's great. And
where is that?
It's at the Greenwich House at 27 Barrow Street.
And how long will it be running?
I don't know. We have kind of shortish runs unless we're real. Mm-hmm. It's on this week and maybe next week.
Great. Tell me about this Little House on the Prairie record that you and Sarah Jessica Parker recorded a long, long time ago.
Right. We, again, that was one of the very first things I did. I was probably 13, maybe 12, very early. And we just did this recording. She played Laura and I played Mary, and we had two actors playing Ma and Pa. But we worked together a number of times, and we also did, when we were 13 and 14, we did a TV movie called My Body, My Child with Vanessa Redgrave and Jack Albertson. I think it was Jack Albertson's last role. And we played sisters. She had 3 daughters in it, and we were 2 of her daughters. Mm-hmm. So, and actually, I was just at the Emmy Awards, and Vanessa Redgrave was at the Emmy Awards because she was nominated. Mm-hmm. And I went up to her and I talked to her. And I didn't know how far if I would have to catch her up. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
So I said, hello. My name is Cythia Nixon. I'm on a show that's called Sex and the City. And Sarah Jessica Parker is also on that show. And that was the first kind of glimmer. She was like, I know Sarah. And I said, well,
we played your daughters in My Body, My Child, a long time ago. And she was floored because Sarah and her daughter, Natasha Richardson, are very good friends.
Ah.
And Sarah, who couldn't fly out for the Emmys because she was so pregnant, was at Natasha Richardson's house watching the Emmys.
Oh, how about that?
So Vanessa Redgrave called and she was like, "You never told me." So, yeah. So the New York theater kid world is very small.
I bet, yeah, I bet. So, not to just hang on the subject, but what was this record for? Was this for your own personal use, or?
Oh
I'm fascinated by this.
no.
Well, with the president and all,
no! With the president?
Melissa Gilbert.
Oh, of course. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I was like, President Bush. Is he a fan of Little House on the Prairie?
He called earlier. He wants to know all about it.
This was prior to the TV series, I want to say. Maybe not. I don't know.
Oh, it couldn't possibly.
No, I guess it
because
wasn't.
you're way younger than I am.
Okay. I don't know. But
And I was young when I was watching it. That's all.
it was just like I don't know, maybe it was for schools or, like a kid's record you could buy. Like they have those now. Like you read the book and there's a little bling and you turn the page.
Oh, okay.
It was like a very abridged version of Little House in the Big Woods.
Gotcha. Just found that really kind of sweet and fascinating.
Yes. I would love to hear it, but I doubt that there's,
Well, maybe if you come back in a couple of months, we can arrange for that. I just wanted to check with you.
I'm all right.
You're right?
I'm all
Okay, we'll keep going. I'm up to questions now from the audience. So when I call your name, just raise your hand. We can see who we're talking to. Beth Joy asks, Beth, hi.
Yeah.
What is the best way to obtain a commercial agent in New York, also including voiceover work? You know what? I should have read this actually before I called your name, because I'm going to guess that this just really isn't up your alley.
Right. I'm very bad with the agent questions because when you're a kid, it's not hard to get an agent, and so, that's just I sort of inherited my agents as I went. So
How many agents have you had in your career?
well, let's see. I had a manager when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Muriel Carl. She was wonderful. She did mostly commercials, and she did road companies of like Sound of Music and Gypsy and stuff. She would get together lots of kids in her agency and rehearse them all and then bring them all in to audition together. And she was my manager from the time I was 12 till I was 18, and so then I would freelance with a million different, and she was lovely. And she was really, as I say, the kind of world that she was trying to push me in, the world that she knew, commercials and musicals. I was not, so she would, I would get calls from her office saying things like, "You have an audition at the Public Theater for Hamlet by William Shakespeare. The role is Ophelia." Like as if there was any doubt what the role would be for me at 15 auditioning for Hamlet. But so when I left, and she was lovely, when I turned 18, she might have tried to hang on to me or something, but she was like, "You're 18, time to go."
See ya.
It's very nice. And then I went to ICM for 8 years or something. And then I went to William Morris for a number of years, and then I went to the Gersh Agency for like a year. Now I'm back at William Morris.
So you've been around a little bit.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay. Why back to William Morris?
Basically, they were having a big shakeup with Triad and all that stuff, and they were kind of all over the place when I left, and they don't seem to be that way anymore. And also, I think, when I left, I was a different place than I am at now, and I think there are all these people who seemed really gung-ho to work with me there, and they've got such a good theater department, literary department, all that stuff. But I have a manager who used to be my agent at William Morris. So, and I've been with her since I'm 26 and I'm 36 now. So, about 15
Oh,
years.
that's nice. That's got to feel
Yeah.
nice and secure.
Yes.
Angela Stribling. Oh, Angela. Okay. Do you think the roles for women getting older are increasing?
Yes, I think there can be no question. And I think that's probably a result of a lot of things. I think it's I think it's partly the way we view women now and what age we think women are old at. I think it's partly to do with women, marrying later, having kids later, being out there, being seen as more sexual in their 40s and 50s, and and I think partly it has to do with a lot of great actresses who kind of made us think about it too.
Yeah, I noticed last week or the week before, Susan Sarandon had 3 movies opening in like a 2-week period, and I just thought that was so fabulous.
Yeah.
Really, really great.
And I think it also probably has something to do with the baby boomers, and do you know what I mean? Like it used
Yeah.
to be either you were, once you were sort of like those Andy Hardy movies,
Right.
the parents had gray hair,
Right.
even though their children were teenagers.
Right. Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
we weren't
yeah.
interested in married people or people of that age. We didn't think
now we're
anything was
all-
happening
right,
with them.
Right.
They were married. They were forget about them. Taken care of. They're not. Nothing's happening.
Little do we know. Melissa Lopo. Did I say that right? Oh, Melissa. Didn't know your last names. How has motherhood impacted your career?
I wouldn't say that it has. I have to admit.
Don't sound like you've missed a beat.
No, I mean, I would say it's more impacted the way people see me from the outside. I don't feel particularly different. I mean, I guess, I think that anything you go through in life obviously helps to have stuff to draw on. And I feel like when I play a mother now, I have access to stuff that maybe I didn't.
Sure.
But I think more it affects how people. I mean, I don't know if I'm the only one of the women up to now who on Sex and the City who has a child, and so I think when they decided to give somebody a baby, I mean, partly I think that comes from them having seen me with my daughter. So they think of me that way. So they wanted to. I mean, partly also it has to do with I think that Miranda is very non-maternal, and they thought that would be funny and interesting. But
And it is both those things,
Yeah.
I have to say.
And I also think that they thought that since I have a child, I would be somewhat astute at dealing with a baby or a child on set, and,
Right,
that
right,
kind
right.
of thing. So I wouldn't say it's had a very, very much of an impact on, on my career or the way I think of my career. I would say more it's probably the way people have seen me.
And what kind of experiences have you had with that? The way people have seen you? You've said that 2 or 3 times.
Well, I mean, I think we know so much about actors' personal lives nowadays. I mean, I so much admire people like Jennifer Jason Leigh, who just somehow just never give interviews, never reveal anything. I think that's great. But I think every time we see some actor that we know of, there's all this biographical information that just pops up in our head about them. And I think it's hard not to bring that to both when you see them in a role that you think jives with what's happening in their life, you go, or something that seems inappropriate, like they're playing someone very sweet and that they're really a bitch, So I think
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Drew Rain. Drew? There you are. If you were given the chance to do regular stand-in work on a popular TV series when you first started out, would you take it?
I don't think that I would have. I mean, I had a, peculiar situation. I was in school. I was trying to, whatever. But, I mean, on the one hand, I think the money is pretty good. So it's hard to look a gift horse in the mouth in that way. But I would not. I would feel like, it's not really going to lead me where I want to go. And in a way, it's sort of, I don't think it's a real, to me, it's not a real learning experience because you're not really in the thick of it. In some ways, I think it's kind of, it can be really painful. It can be kind of the worst of both worlds. You're actually working on a film or a TV series or something, but you're not really a part of it. You're not really, So I would say no. I would say no, but.
Sarah Anderson. I'm coming from an extensive theater background and several years in Los Angeles. Any recommendations for breaking into the New York City TV film areas?
God, no.
I guess people in New York, on a very broad basis, don't seem to give a lot of credibility to if you're coming from LA.
I think that's probably true. Although, did you do your theater in LA?
I've done it all over.
Right.
A lot of training, but
Right.
it's hard to convince people.
Right. Right. I mean, people do tend to, not everybody, but I would think that people do have a better kind of feeling like, oh, theater, But I don't know what to tell you. I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you.
Karen White. Hi. Do you have any background in improv? Also, have any of your film or theater directors used improv in rehearsal, and what did you think of the process?
I don't have a background per se, but I love it. I think it's just so fun. The closest thing I really ever had, I have occasionally had theater directors who will use it, particularly if you're getting stuck in a place in rehearsal and you don't really understand what part you're playing in the scene. It sometimes helps, I think, to do improv. Or when we did The Women, we did a whole series of exercises before we really got into the thick of rehearsal, which would get, I thought were really interesting, which would get closer and closer to the real play. Like, first we would just do improvs. Because we had such a large cast, there were like 26 of us or something. We would do improvs with like 7 people. And that sort of was about, you have to understand, what your part is in this scene. And your part may not be walking down stage center and starting to, it might be just sounding your note, And then we would lay on the period. So we would try and play the period, which is hard to do. And then we would sort of lay on themes of the play, like, now we're going to do a play in the period about gossip or about infidelity or about, and sort of get us thinking about those themes, which I thought was really interesting. But it sort of made us think in a way about the themes and anyway. But I would say that the closest real improv thing that I've ever done was when I was 21, 22. I did a strange TV series, also for HBO, called Tanner 88, that Robert Altman directed, and that Gary Trudeau kind of wrote, kind of didn't. And it was about the 1988 election. There were 7 men running for trying to get the Democratic nomination, and they all kind of seemed the same. They all kind of white men in suits, and they all kind of, like, which one is that one? People call them the 7 dwarfs and stuff. And so we decided we would just invent our own candidate and kind of have him look like all those guys. And we would go out to different parts of the country, like to New Hampshire for the primary and Nashville for Super Tuesday, where the real guys were, and sort of try and pass ourselves off on the street. As, hi, I'm Jack Tanner, I'm running for president, and and I played his daughter, who's sort of like an Amy Carter kind of, character. And it was it was fun. I mean, it's kind of a mess. It's like some episodes are great and some episodes are unwatchable, and so, but it was really fun. It was really fun trying to be in there and put yourself in the mindset. And also we became kind of a little cult favorite of all these guys and their campaign people. You know, they would sit and watch us at home because we were happening at the same time as the election. So they loved us. And so we got so, you know, Dukakis and Babbitt and Jack Kemp and all these people and newscasters who were loving the way it was sort of bending reality
Right.
and making fun, you know. So, so yeah, I think improv is great. Great. I mean, I also just did a little day on a film on last week with this actor comic James Gaffigan, who was in that show Welcome to New York, and he's really a comic, you know. So we played this married couple who were trying to get our child into this very exclusive New York private school, and we, you know, we're talking to it was like a mockumentary and talking to the interviewer about whatever, and yeah, we just went, and it was great. I love improv. I love improv.
Aleem Akbar. Did I get that right?
That's right.
Okay. Were you and Sarah Jessica Parker in touch from the time of My Body, My Child until Sex and the City?
No, she went to LA. So I can't remember how old she was when she probably 18 or something. She went to LA and she was out there for a while. And our paths would cross in little ways. I replaced her in the Heidi Chronicles.
Huh.
Which is by Wendy Wasserstein, and then a number of years later, we did a short film of Wendy Wasserstein's on PBS, and she couldn't do it, and I did it, and and then when she made a decision when she was doing that play, Substance of Fire, to move back to New York. And I went to see her in it, and you know, she would come to see me in plays, and we sort of started intersecting a little bit. Just around New York theater things. And then we invited her to be a part of the drama department, and she joined that. And so she would come and do readings with us. So I would say, yeah, there was kind of a big chunk of time of maybe 10 years or something when she was in LA when I really didn't see her at all.
And when does she do?
She's due very soon.
Like soon?
Very soon, yes.
Okay. Tom, and sorry, Tom, hang on one second. When are you shooting again?
March.
Oh, so you're
late March, early April.
Okay. Tom Tominello. You have an impressive resume. What was your favorite role? Also, have you and Sarah Jessica Parker been friends since you were teenagers? Got that. What was your favorite role?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, there've been. I did. Last time I was pregnant, I did Doll's House. I did Nora in a Doll's House, the McCarter, and I loved that. But then they're all I mean, they're like I did. Some of the parts that I've done that I had my favorites were not particularly the real big ones, or like I did a TV movie 2 years. I did a TV movie 2 years ago with Scott Bakula called Papa's Angels, which kind of a wild thing. It was taken from a play and then a book by a woman with an unrememberable name, who played Mayella Ewell in To Kill a Mockingbird years ago.
Yeah.
And she went and took over her. What is that? That's in the 50s or gotta be. And she 60s. And her parents are from North Carolina, and they ran a WPA theater out there from the Depression. And then when her parents got too old, she moved out there and started running it. And she's been running it out there for decades. And she had to come up with a new Christmas play because you got to do the Christmas play. It brings in the money, you know. So she wrote this thing called Papa's Angels, and it was like a great hit. And then she turned it into a novel, and it's wonderful. And we filmed it as a TV movie, and I played an Appalachian mother of four during the Depression who's dying of tuberculosis.
Wow.
It was so great. It was so much fun. It was such a relief from Sex and the City. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was like, I had a long blonde wig. I was married to Scott Bakula, and I loved him.
That's not so bad. Yeah.
Not so
Not
bad. It had some music in it, and he's a tremendous musician. I had these 4 kids.
Flat,
One of them was
walkable
deaf.
shoes.
We signed some. And I got to get sick and die, and it was great. It was so great. And also, my grandmother is from that part of the country. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I feel like,
you can relate a little.
I feel like it's so much, that's the way I really see myself. I know I'm deluded, but that's so much,
Funny. That's funny. I actually understand that.
Yeah.
What was your scariest theater moment?
My scariest theater moment. I've had a few. I would say one of the scariest was I went back into the real thing after being out of it for a while, after doing Hurly Burly for a while. Mm-hmm. And I had been back in for a few performances, and I was only in one scene in the real thing, and we had a rotating stage, and I would rotate into place. We would all, Jeremy Irons and Christine Baranski and I. And in the dark, as we're moving, I thought, I don't know what my first line is. And I had done the play so many times. I thought, well, that's crazy that you don't know what your first line is. And I said, you obviously know it. You should just relax and it'll come. And it was sort of too late. I mean, I suppose I could have shouted to him in the dark, but we're rotating and there's music, transition music.
And you're trying not to lose your mind on top of it.
And I just think, it's there. Just
Yeah. Relax.
So he had the first line, and he said his first line. And I thought to myself, just open your mouth and it will come out. So I opened my mouth and I said, yeah, there's that. and like craziness came out. But in a way, I suppose it was better than nothing coming out. And he looked at me for a moment. And he said his next line, and by that point I somehow had gotten it back together. But that was really bad.
That's right, Nick. That seems to be the most traumatic.
Yeah, I mean, I've had terrible things. I had my skirt fall off on stage once with Roger Rees, and the terrible thing, and the class broke, so it wasn't even just like I could then hook it and fix it. It was broken. And the scene that he and I had together, it's a sex farce, but not like with your skirts falling down, sex farce. And it was all incredibly athletic, running up and down the staircases, and I wound up on his shoulders, and then I fell backwards. And I mean, it was like trying to do all this crazy blocking and trying not to, because you couldn't acknowledge that your skirt was falling off. It wouldn't make any sense in the scene. It was terrible. And I had my boyfriend's extended family was there. So they were I literally, I had 25 semi-relatives in the house. And Julie Harris was there that evening. Oh, it was very disappointing. Very disappointing. And I've also had that terrible moment. I think I've only had it once, but I had the terrible moment when I was doing the Philadelphia story when I was 14, and I was watching from the wings. And I had that moment where I was watching the part of the play that I'd never seen before. Mm-hmm. That's because that was the part of the play
you were supposed to be there.
And I kept watching. I thought, I've never seen this part before. And that's because we were so close to my cue, and then my cue happened. But I was right there. It was fine. But
very funny.
There's also one more.
Go for it.
Which is not actually, that's something that happened to me again on stage. It was off stage, and I don't really miss cues very much. So you don't get the impression. But I was doing this production of The Cherry Orchard at the York Theater, and I was playing I was playing Anya, and it wasn't a very good production. And Anya has to come on in the third act and say, a moment ago in the kitchen, a man just said, the cherry orchard has been sold. And my mother says, sold to whom? And I say, I don't know, he didn't say, and then I would waltz off. And it was never an entrance that had a lot of reality to it, and it seemed contrived as Chekhov wrote it, and even more so as we were playing it, and whatever. So I was standing off stage with the actress who played Varya, and this very frightened young stage manager came up to me with his headphones on, and I'm in the wings. And he says, Anya, entrance. And I say, what? And then we went back and forth a long time. I just skipped to my next entrance because it was so small, and I just forgotten it. I was like, Lopakin isn't even on yet. What are you crazy? And he was so young and so panicked that all he could say, he just kept repeating, Anya, entrance. And I just started ignoring him after a while because it was like, So on the other side of the stage, there were the Carlotta and Dunyasha, and they were like thinking something had happened to me. And nothing can proceed until that information is given. Because everything that happens to play after that has to do with that information. So the Dunyasha, she decides she's gonna, in her Dunyashic way, she's gonna take care of it. So she comes on, but she doesn't really know the line. So she says, and there's nothing happening on stage. The actor playing Trofimov is trying to improvise. And the actress playing Medoredovskaya is just fanning herself and just trying to ignore his improvs because she thinks that's a bad way to go. So the Dunyasha comes on, and she says, with her little tray and her little ribbons in her hair, and she says, I just heard backstage that the cherry orchard has been sold. And I'm standing in the wings and I see this happen, and I think, oh, that was my fault. Anya entrance.
Oh God, that's very funny.
And luckily, because her miss line was so hilarious and awful, everyone sort of forgot that it was actually my fault, because her event so superseded mine.
Funny. Win-win. Back to questions. Richard Lear. Hi. About how many scripts do you receive a month? Does your agent read them first? Are you open to indie films?
Yes, I am open to indie films, not particularly at the moment. I basically feel like I'm going to try not to do anything before I go back. I think it's going to, and we're going to shoot a very long season next year. We're going to shoot till the end of the year. We're going to shoot many episodes. I don't know how many scripts I get a month. I don't know. I'm not really getting so many nowadays because I'm not available.
Right.
But people send me plays sometimes. Generally, though, movie scripts, go probably to my manager first, so she reads them, so she at least knows what's happening.
Going on.
Yeah.
Claudia R. Hi. Claudia. Oh, Claudia. Hi. Having performed in the New York Shakespeare Festival, what do you suggest to trained actors wishing to work in period theater and film who don't have an agent?
Well, I would think in a way it would be probably one of the relatively easier, parts of the business to get into, because it's such a small world. It's such a niche thing, particularly if you have training, in that. And so much of it is really, particularly with Shakespeare and stuff, so much of it really is about, when you come in, if you can get an audition, can you do it? So.
Taj Crown, is that right? Why are there no minority actors in Sex and the City? I don't know that last word, but I think I've got the general gist, right?
That's a very good question.
Oh, cast, sorry.
Cast. It's always been a big issue. I mean, I would say I love my show and I'm crazy about it, but I would say it's a real blind spot. It's a real failing of the show. when it was first done, Darren Starr, who wrote it and produced it, he felt like he knew this world and he moved into this world, and it was a very segregated world. It was a very white world.
Upper East Side rich people, so naturally, if you're doing that story,
Well,
you tend to be with
but
us.
I on the one hand, I don't move in that world, so I don't know. I would find it hard to believe that it's as segregated as our show is, and I also think, frankly, even if it is, I don't think that's such a good excuse for it. I know we all complained about it quite a bit, and Sarah Jessica particularly was very vocal about it and very vocal about it with the press. And I think, what can I say? There have been some little, movements forward, but I think it was I think it was a kind of a deliberate choice, and I think it was a wrong choice. And I think, now you got the four girls. The four girls are the four girls. I mean, I think they're talking about, giving me an African American love interest, next season, and they're little.
It's all about New York City.
Exactly.
And New York City, as we all know, has a lot of colors in it.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Be nice to see once in a while.
I think we're all in agreement on
I
that
couldn't
one.
agree with you more. And I feel like, television and theater too, I would say, there's so many different things going on right now. You know what I mean? Like, there is a world of television that you turn on that's an integrated world. Do you know? I would say more in the, hour-long shows, the medical dramas, the, cop and lawyers, and, more workplace, I would say, places. And then I think you have very white television that's sort of like back in the past. And I think you also have, very black television that's similarly segregated. We're living what we see in our TV particularly and in our theater particularly. Films are sort of different, but it is these sort of these simultaneous realities happening. You have an integrated world that's caught up, and you have that in New York theater too. You have places like the Public where there is more of a colorblind approach, even if it doesn't. Even if you're kind of ignoring families that are made up of people that wouldn't come out of those other people. And then you have but that's not the bulk of what you see. The bulk of what you see is kind of got a long ways to go to catch up.
Thank you.
Val Moranto. How do you maintain such a balanced life, and you seem so strong and confident, with family and major career?
Well, let's see. I do think that the first 10 years of my career that I had with school was sort of good training for that, particularly because I did see a lot of kid actors around me. Again, anything that's true of an actor is true of a kid actor, just much more so. Do you know what I mean? I did see kid actors around me who were making all kinds of mistakes that grown-up actors make in terms of getting so into their career and being so thrilled and thinking it was just the be-all and end-all, or if things weren't going well, thinking it was just devastation, or and I found it was really good training to sort of have my regular friends and my school and my stuff that the business of life, was really, I also feel like, certainly my career takes a lot of time, and also kind of the stuff around the career, interviews and awards shows and, functions they ask you to come to and all that stuff. But, I feel like I kind of lucked into this sort of, gold rush. And I didn't particularly, I suppose in a way I made it happen by sort of kind of working at my job and doing all that stuff. But I feel like it wasn't a particular like, and now I'm going to launch this huge, I think that kind of sort of long-term planning takes a lot more time and a lot more of yourself to sort of mastermind it. So, I mean, I'm not saying it's not hard. It's hard. But, yeah, I just think that for any actor, it's so good if you have something else, whatever that thing is, a spouse, a lover, a child, a hobby, a whatever, that you can go and be there, and so that when something isn't happening work-wise, it doesn't feel like nothing is happening anywhere.
That's a really good point. Ellen Gary, where are you? No, there you are. What suggestions would you give to get the actor you are working with in a positive frame of mind if they are not already in one?
That is such an interesting question. It's really hard. I mean, it's really hard. It depends on how well you know them and what, I mean, I would just say, and it goes back to sort of the English actor question, you know what I mean? I think you got to do everything you can to make them feel comfortable. Whatever that seems to, you got to try different things, whether that's talking about the scene or improvising, or whether it's not to do with the scene at all. Maybe there's something about you that they find intimidating, or, talk to them, ask them questions about themselves. I mean, I would say there are so it's so hard. It's so hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I would think, try different tacks and try, keeping at them for a while, and then at a certain point you got to give them space and just let them, do whatever. If you feel like you have a director that you can go to, and But I would say that so much of what people are going to see has to do, no matter how good an actor you are, there's always some part of it, what they're going to see, that has to do with what's really going on. So I would say that if anything, to ask that person about themselves, or to try and forge some kind of connection, whatever, whatever the thing, or to go out and drink with them, or to go out and, anything that
Connect.
you can do to connect,
Yeah.
I think,
No name, but the question is, how do you maintain your energy level with such a full life? What advice would you share for keeping a role fresh after performing it so many times, i.e. Miranda?
I would not say, I mean, I don't find Miranda hard to keep fresh at all, or it doesn't feel like, because I feel like she doesn't seem, I always get new material, new stuff happens to her. So I would say it's much harder to, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say some of the theater roles, which is
yeah,
probably what you were
right,
just gonna say.
exactly. I mean, I find that theater roles are much harder to keep fresher, because you have to go out there and say the same lines every night, and particularly if something was a hit and people were screaming, and now they're sort of like, and I feel like, I always think that if you have a receptive scene partner and you can change stuff, I find that really helpful. I also find it helpful to remind yourself that, you don't necessarily have to, at a certain point, you don't have to do it better. At a certain point, better is going to make it worse. More all the time is going to make it worse. I mean, there's some story about a woman who was in a play, and she would come in a huff and, take her gloves off and throw them on the ground and start to yell at her husband or whatever. And then one night she was doing this, and she realized she didn't even have any gloves on. She had left. And she was so doing the result of the thing.
Right.
And I think we want to feel it. We want to feel it so much, and we've got to, restrain yourself from the desire to feel it. And
it's one of the good things to remember as an actor. It's like they're getting it.
Right.
They don't have to have it like spelled out for them. So if you're you don't have to go for the effect. You know, you go for what really is happening with the character, and they'll get it.
Mm-hmm. Carolyn Larson. The chemistry between the actors on Sex and the City is just fabulous. Has there ever been a time when some issue or tiff would occur between a member of the cast? And if so, how was it resolved? 4 women, lots of clothes, lots of makeup. I don't know. I'm thinking a problem here or there at one point.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I don't know. People like to think that whatever, 4 women. I mean, we got that on the women too, actually. Oh, get all those women together in one place. Oh, look out, I would say we're 4 really, really different people. And sometimes, we have, things going on in our lives that are difficult, and we can, react to that differently. We can get we can get quiet if that happens, or we can get emotional if that happens, We got long hours and all that kind of stuff. But, you work through that the way you work through it in any, workplace. You try and figure out what the person who's not doing so well needs, Do they need space, or do they need you to come into their room and say, how you doing? Or do they need some little, token that shows that you're there and you're watching them and you don't want to crowd them. But,
Just people.
Yeah.
Being people.
Yeah.
Genevieve Hannon. How do you prepare for a role? And does your preparation differ between film, television, and theatrical roles? And does it depend on the type of role?
I don't prepare a lot, I gotta say. Partly it depends on, I've had the luxury of being young for a long time and not having memorizing being a real problem. And that's, fades with time, it becomes more and more of an issue, So sometimes, depending on what kind of rehearsal I get, sometimes nowadays I do something I would never have done in the past, which is I do sit down and try and learn it, which I think is probably a good idea for anybody. You know what I mean? Like, I can fool myself and think it's somehow organic if I don't know the lines yet, and I don't think that's probably ever really true. I mean, sometimes you can get away with it. It doesn't matter. You learn them in rehearsal just by doing them over and over. It depends. I do find, partly I take the lead from the director. Some directors really want you to come in with the lines learned. Some directors provide you with some directors are much more about improvisation or what happens in the room and don't want you to work too much outside. But I find one of the nicest things to do if I'm doing a period piece is to try and immerse myself in the period. So, some way, if it's, if we have films from that time, to watch those films. If we have, books that are either written at that time or written about that time, read them and kind of give yourself the flavor of them. I also think it's interesting, when you have the choice, when you're doing a role that someone has done before or that many people have done before, and you have performances that you can go and see, it's always an interesting question of whether you do that or not. Yeah, they do. I mean, I would think partly it has to do with, I remember reading that when Vanessa Redgrave was very young, she played Ariel, and her father played Prospero, and she was like 18 or something, and she went and watched every one that she could find and listened to lots of recordings mostly, and she would kind of be the last actor that I would think would do that. But sometimes it's really useful. I think a time it can be really harmful is if you think, I'm so far from this character, and this other actor has played it who is so close to that character. And I think that can be dangerous. But I also think particularly for more classical parts, it's sometimes useful to go watch old movies of them, even just schematically. Oh, look how that part of the script, that's the really happy part, or that's the really romantic part, or look how, So.
Adrian Martinez. Many producers promised to support New York City after 9/11, but film production remains down here. Have you heard if things will pick up or not?
I have not. I mean, I don't know what to say about the whole New York production thing. I mean, I feel like in a way there's more television happening here than there was, 10 years ago. I haven't heard anything, and I don't quite know what to make of it all. There's so much less film production in New York than there was when I was a kid, and you hear all the time how expensive it is. And on the other hand, I keep hearing from the guys on our crew how much they keep giving away in terms of what they used to get, in terms of salary and benefits and golden time and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think there's a certain core level of production that will always happen here because of the city and the way it looks and what it means to people, and also because of the tremendous pool of actors that you have here. Mm. But I certainly think it's, it's not what it was, and it's not what it could be.
Yeah, agreed. Also from Adrian, do you save it for the close-up, as some actors suggest, or do you go full out on every take?
Well, it kind of, I would say that one of my problems as an actor is I sort of fix on an idea of how a scene should be and how a particular line should be and exactly kind of what level I should be hitting with it, which I think is a bad idea. And partly one of the real traps about working that way is the more you have to do it, whether it's a number of takes or a number of performances of a stage play, it becomes more and more the idea of the thing and less the thing itself. So I would never in the past have described myself as someone who saves it for the close-up. And it depends on who you're in the scene with and what the nature of the scene is, of course, and all that stuff. But I feel in a way I'm more likely to save it for a close-up now because when my idea more of what I'm trying to do has to do with sort of letting what happens happen and sort of be more relaxed about it and be more free about it. So I feel the more I try and sort of really do my best take, particularly if it goes well, then I sort of freeze it and, I think the real thing is to just, sort of be there all the time and, but I also do feel like, particularly with film, that it has your performance sort of has a kind of a maturation and a ripening and then a kind of rottening. And I used to be a person who would love lots and lots and lots of takes. Because again, I had this, eye on the prize, this thing that I was going for. And I find, because I do watch my dailies very carefully, I find when I'm really taking that approach, which is a very focused approach and very, and I watch all the takes, they're all the same. And even when I've felt like, on take 4, I really, it's all so similar. And the minutia of like, I felt like that was like, whoa. It's so, you can't see it. And it leads to something that really is dead. So, and I understand more now. I don't agree with them or approve with them, but like you always hear about Burt Reynolds, that after like 2 or 3 takes, He's like, well, what aren't you getting? Well, what more do you want? Do you know what I mean? And I think there's probably a way in which he's right. It's surprising to me how often the early takes are better when you are less in control of it. You know?
Interesting. David McConaughey, thanks for all your work on behalf of New York City students and their parents. What educational challenges did you face growing up as a working actor, and how did your parents feel about your auditioning and performing at such an early age?
I don't feel, I feel like I was in a really good, rigorous school, and that the kids that I was surrounded with really cared about school and were really brilliant, a lot of them. And one had to really, work hard to keep up. And I found that very valuable. And of course, I had celebrity status in my school and my class and all that. But I think less so than I would have at another place, because there were so many brilliant kids there with so many interests and accomplishments in music and science and different fields, I did have certain challenges trying to fit my schoolwork in. There were some crazy times when I would be doing plays, when I would come home after school and I would sleep. And I would sleep until like 6 o'clock. And I would sort of stumble up and get a piece of pizza and walk to the theater and do my show and then come home and work into the wee hours until my homework was done. That was exhausting. I was tired a lot.
That's commitment. I wouldn't have done that as a kid or a teenager.
For the first 10 years, the time that I was in school, I could fall asleep anywhere, anytime in 5 minutes. It's an indication of how exhausted I was.
Right.
And I remember there's a time in Hurly-Burly when we were in rehearsal, and Mike Nichols was giving notes, and I was at a smaller part. I didn't figure so prominently in the notes. We were all sitting around, I was sitting on a couch and people around me in chairs, and I fell asleep in the notes.
Wow.
And they rehearsed around me. Wow. Notes had finished, and they
Let her sleep.
Yeah, and I would always, and I still have that a little bit. I don't sleep as well as fast as I used to, but I always, like the production assistants on my show know, I'm not a person who wants to be woken up 15 minutes before they need me. I want to be woken up when they need me. Because I would also sleep on the bench outside the rehearsal room for Hurly-Burly and The Real Thing, and they would always they were like, your cue, and I would just get up and I would just, and battle. It was like battle. It was like a soldier sleeping, okay, And I used to, in college, I was so exhausted. In college, I would carry an alarm clock around with me.
Wow.
And I went to school in the city. It was not a very big campus. It was not like going home would have taken more than 15 minutes. But I couldn't spare it. I would have a couple hours, I would sleep between class. So there was a basement that had these beanbag chairs. And I would, schedule and I could sleep between 1:15 and 3, and I would take my little alarm clock and I would fall asleep in the beanbag chair. And I had this whole idea that after I graduated later, that I would endow a bunch of beanbag chairs all over the campus for sleepy students. And also in terms of the question about, how did my parents feel about my acting at such an early age? I think they were pretty careful about it, trying to protect what needed to be protected. But I also think, it's crazy to say it now, but it had been an idea that it was in the wind so much about my being an actor from a very early age. And when we lived in New York, you knew kids who were doing modeling or doing all these different, it was in the air. You were always reading an article about Justin Henry or Brooke Shields or Ali Sheedy or somebody. And so my parents and I were so proud of ourselves that we had waited until I was 11. It somehow seemed that I was competent and to know what was happening to me, rather than if they'd pushed me out there at 4.
Right.
Which I suppose is a point of view. It sounds crazy now, but
I get it.
yeah.
Here's an interesting question from S. Ratner. Sheila. Oh, hello. How can you play Miranda so flawlessly without having met my ex-girlfriend, a lawyer?
Thank you. That's very nice. Thank you.
Taj Crown again.
Oh, can I take it back, please?
Excuse me? Do you want to take it back?
This question is very relevant right now because she's blonde already. I'm used to seeing her in red.
Yes. Well, I have to ask the question because nobody that ever watches this tape is going to hear it from you, from the audience, and it's kind of interesting. So I'm going to ask it. Did you ever try a blonde hairdo?
I wonder what a blonde hairdo is really, but yeah, I am a blonde. I am naturally a blonde.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yes. Although this is dyed, but I am a blonde.
Nita Savage. Yes. Nita? Oh, hi. How did you get your agent? You've talked about that. Any suggestions toward that end in today's climate? How to get an agent?
I'm not good on this question, I'm afraid, because I had such peculiar. I mean, I know what my friends do. I mean, I know they send in their pictures and resumes, and they go to open calls, and they sometimes they get ambitious and they produce things for themselves, or they produce scene nights for themselves, or write things for themselves.
Right. Judy Mark. Judy? There you are. How can I get on Sex in the City, and what are they looking for? The question that everybody here wants to ask. Thank you, Judy. And she's feverishly ripping her bottle to shreds over this question.
I don't know. What are they looking for? I would say one of the good things about Sex and the City is we do have an awful lot of, parts every week. Bigger parts, smaller parts, and we're going to be doing, as I say, I think we're going to be doing like 20 episodes next year. So it's a lot. I don't know. Other than Jennifer McNamara is our casting director. You send in your resume.
Jenny Graham. I love this question. Where are you, Jenny? There you are. How do you handle on-stage, on-screen nudity?
I haven't done on-stage nudity. I don't think I've really done. They're very good, and they leave it up to us really how much we're comfortable with, because different ones of us are comfortable with different amounts. But I would say for me, I had never done any nudity before Sex and the City, but it didn't. I'm not a particularly modest person, and it didn't particularly alarm me. It was strange at first. It felt weird at first, but I pretty much all the nudity I've done is above the waist, and I feel like if you've breastfed in public, it's kind of the same,
Hope Carter. Hope. Hi. Is there anything acting has taught you about yourself that you might not have discovered otherwise? It's a good question.
Yeah, I think that there are two basic kind of actors, There are the actors who are the kind of extroverted life of the party people, and who people think of them as so naturally, suited for acting. And then you have the more introverted, type of people who kind of need it as more of a, way to express stuff that they wouldn't otherwise get expressed. And I think that I fall more into the latter category. I don't think that I don't strike myself as particularly a performer, type. But I would say, particularly when I was a kid, My mother is wonderful, but one thing she is really not good with is she's not really good at allowing for a lot of rage and fighting and you know what I mean? She just doesn't, she doesn't find it productive. She doesn't really permit it, So I would say that when I was a teenager, particularly, it was a really good place to put all that stuff and to go and some place where if you would cry, they'd be so pleased, and a place where you could go and, explore all the darker, uglier feelings and, so I mean, now, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it hasn't served that function for me in a while, but it certainly did at one time. So I guess that's the stuff. That's the stuff but I have to say now, being a mother, the rage that my daughter is able to pull out of me is nothing compared to what I've been able to pull out of myself for performance. So I don't really know what it's sort of teaching me about myself right now, But I do think sometimes that when you do play a part that's so different than you, it does teach you about a way of being that you never would have imagined, or, a part of yourself that you didn't think even existed, so.
Karen Weatherwax. Karen. Oh, there you are. What one career choice could you not have done without? I.e., what do you regret the least? Ah, gotcha.
Well, I don't feel like I made a lot of kind of career choices particularly, other than the ones I've been talking about in terms of trying to protect my school and protect my life, try and stay in New York as much as I can. I would say I've never been a person who made a lot of, I think had I made more choices about where my career would go, I would not have made such good choices.
That's interesting.
I would not have, I mean, I had certain, things like, I'm not going to take these things, I'm not going to mess up my school, I'm not, that kind of thing. But had I actually tried to think like what roles, I think I would have probably found my way into just a little niche, of New York off-Broadway theater, just would stay there forever, if I had actually been controlling it.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't feel like I made a lot of choices other than there's a job, I've been offered it, it seems good enough to do, I'm gonna do it,
Doreen Daniel? Did you enjoy being a woman in The Women as much as you like being a woman in Sex and the City, or vice versa?
It was really an interesting contrast. They really could not have been more different. I enjoy being a woman on Sex and the City much more. I enjoy being a woman today, I think, more than I would have enjoyed being a woman in, 1934. My character in The Women, she has a kind of a whole trajectory of character. When she starts out in the beginning, she's very isolated. She has these women who are ostensibly her friends, but they're really more her social set. They're really not very nice. They don't really have much affection for her, much goodwill for her, really. And she is a pretty good-hearted person, and she makes the mistake of thinking they have her best interests at heart, and they set about to, for no real reason other than sort of jealousy and boredom, to kind of destroy her life. And then she kind of crawls her way back and tries to figure out, what she wants. And part of what she does is she replaces her set of friends with a real set of friends, women who are not perhaps the the women in the society pages and the richest and the most fashionable. You know, they're kind of more of a motley crew, but they care about her and they fight for her, and they fight for themselves. They're going after what they want in their life rather than being all full of propriety and just having all their fun by looking down on people and judging other people. So I would say that it was much more fun to be in the second act of The Women after this had happened to my character, or was in the process of happening. But it's much more fun to be a woman in Sex and the City, where like she's, you know, those women have left the women in the dust. You know, I mean, they have other problems, and maybe they can't. Maybe they're more confused about, you know, men and children and relationships and that kind of thing. But maybe they're more confused because they're also asking questions that the women would never even occur to them to ask. So.
Well, that's it for the questions. You have been absolutely delightful
Thank
and really fun.